My life changed completely when I changed one thing about how I was approaching God and trying to communicate with Him. I stopped talking and I started listening. Let me explain. Since when I was young, I always wanted to have that direct relationship with God where I could just communicate with Him directly and personally on an individual level. But I never really knew how to do that. I grew up in a Christian household, so I always knew how to pray, but I never really knew how I could get to the point where I could hear God speaking to me directly. And I remember one time a few years ago, I was going for a challenging period in my life, and I really wanted to hear Him speak to me directly about what I was going through. And as I was listening to one of Dr. Miles Monroe's preachings, he said something along the lines of, you have to stop talking and you have to start being quiet and just listening. It seems like a pretty obvious thing, but I feel like we don't do that a lot when we approach God. A lot of times we go to Him, we pray, so we say everything we need to say, we ask Him for help on many different things, and then we leave. And the problem is, if we just talk and then we leave, how could we possibly hear what God has to say? So prayer really shouldn't just be about us talking all the time and asking what we need to ask. It should also be about listening. And so I started practicing meditation. Now, I don't know if meditation is the right word. I know it might put some people off, but really what it was just me being quiet in the presence of God. Sometimes I wasn't even praying. Sometimes I just started sitting quietly, trying to quiet my mind, because I think that's the most difficult part. Whenever you try to sit down and just be quiet, with your mind being quiet, it is difficult because your thoughts just continue spiraling on a million different things. And so the very first thing I tried to learn was to quiet my mind. And then as I was learning to do this, I also started practicing quiet time when I was in prayer or when I was worshiping. I realized, you know what, I don't need to be talking all the time. If I want to hear what God has to say, I should also be quiet. Because what kind of relationship can we have with God if we are the ones talking all the time and never listening? I don't think there's any relationship you have in your life where you are the one talking all the time and never listening. That wouldn't work with anyone. Your spouse, your children, your friends, your family. No one can be close to someone where they are the only ones talking all the time, because there's no communication, there's no exchange, and therefore you cannot really build a relationship this way. But we do that with God all the time. We talk all the time with Him, to Him actually, and then we leave, and then we are upset because we don't hear from Him, or we don't think we are hearing what He has to say. So the very first thing you have to start doing, if you aren't already, is learning to quiet your mind and learning to leave that space for God to speak. Whenever you are in God's presence, whenever you're praying or worshiping, make sure you also leave time for Him to express Himself. Leave time of silence, leave time where you're just quiet and you are trying to hear His voice. And then to increase that capacity, actually, one thing that helps a lot is fasting. I started fasting more seriously, I think around 5 years ago, and I've definitely seen a massive improvement in my ability to hear God's voice. And that is because fasting increases your spiritual capacity, obviously. And I'm talking especially long fasts. So when you fast, because you are so laser focused on God and your spiritual life, that generally increases your ability to hear from God. And it's not magic. It's simply because you are focused on God, you are focused on your spiritual life, and because you are depriving yourself of food and many other distractions that we have in our daily life, then we are more attuned to hearing God's voice. So if you don't do that already, I would also suggest to start trying to fast from time to time. You can start with smaller fasts and then increase the length. But there's a lot that can be said about fasts. So just make sure you do your own research before you start trying to fast. And then as for any other thing, the reality is it takes practice and consistency. When I first started trying to listen to God's voice over 5 years ago, obviously I didn't find it as, let's say, easy as I find it now. And the truth is that if you stop for a while, if you stop putting that effort into trying to listen to God's voice for a while, then it might become more difficult. And it's not because God is silent, because a lot of times I think we believe that we don't hear from God because He is distant or He doesn't want to talk to us, but that's not the case. A lot of times is that we are distracted and we don't have that ability to leave that space for Him to talk and for us to be able to listen. But honestly, being able to hear from the God of the universe who created everything and that he's speaking to you directly and personally is, I think, the most life-changing thing you can experience. And so even though it might be difficult at first, it is definitely worth the effort over time. I cannot even put into words how much being able to hear God's voice directly, being able to hear him direct my path, telling me what to do, what not to do in many different situations, has helped me in my life. But not just in terms of going about life and difficult seasons, but especially in getting to know him more and allowing him to work on us more. When we are more open to hearing from God, it shouldn't just be so that he can tell us what direction to take in our life. It should also be because we want to get to know him more, because we want to understand how he is deeply, because he has his own character, he has his own personality, and it takes time and it takes a relationship to be able to get to know him at that level. There is no skill that comes easy, and so as for any other ability, you have to train yourself, and it is going to take time. But I really hope I have encouraged you to start leaving space for God to speak to you, and to start quieting your mind and quieting yourself, to allowing him to have that space and speak to you. I really hope this video has encouraged you to start looking for his voice in your life. And you know, there's many ways in which God can speak to us. It might not always be necessarily directly to us. Sometimes he uses many different ways. He can use the Bible, he can use a preaching, he can use a friend or another person. There's many different ways in which God can speak to us, but learning to hear his voice directly is something that all of us can learn, and it's something that you don't want to miss out on. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you have done in your life that has helped you to get closer to God and being able to hear his voice directly. I think many of us have probably different experiences, and so it's always good to share and learn from other people. So thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye.